Today I am speaking with Susan McCulley. I'm starting to lose count of the number of times Susan has joined me as a guest on the show, but every time I receive such gorgeous comments from people who have enjoyed our conversation, and I'm sure today will be no different. We are talking about boundaries. It's something that comes up a lot with my coaching clients. It's something that comes up a lot in the retreats that I run, in the workshops, in the webinars, in the talks that I do into organizations. Boundaries often arises. And I think it's partly because we all know we need them. We might even have a sense of where they are and where we are holding them. And we probably have a sense of where they are not and where we need to put them into place. But what can feel difficult is how to actually set them. And then once they're set, how do we maintain them? And Susan and I are going to be talking about this topic from all kinds of angles. And as ever, I'm not being too prescriptive about how we approach it, because these conversations are often better when they are fluid. So I'm just waiting for Susan to arrive now, and we will be back in a moment. And I really look forward to having this conversation with her, and I'm very grateful to you for joining us. Yay! And they're back.
Hello. Hello, friend. So good to
Oh,
see you.
so good to see you. I have actually lost count of the number of times we've spoken now. It just feels so gorgeous just to know that, each season we have a Henny and Susan conversation.
That is right. And it's funny, and today is a good example is that things come, I start sort of percolating on things, and I think, ooh, this would be a good one to talk to Henny about.
Mm.
Henny would help me sort this.
So, well, that feels like a really, let's just dive head first in. You said, when just before we press record just now, you said that the whole topic of boundaries had been coming up. There were like things that you were like, I'd really like to explore that. And
Hmm.
and you pinged a note to me, and I went, oh yeah, because boundaries comes up all the time with clients. I mean, endlessly.
I bet, yeah.
And I can't quite believe I haven't actually done an episode on them already. So this feels very, very timely for me too. But talk to us, my darling. Talk to us about what little things have been bubbling around. And
Yeah. Yeah. So in my work with my community and my students, this topic of boundaries, of saying yes when it feels like a real yes and no when that's what the answer is, does keep coming up. And I work with a lot of women, and I don't think this is at all an exclusively a woman issue by any means. But I do find that women have been taught that yes is the correct answer. That when somebody asks something of you, if you are able to do it in any capacity, then the answer is yes. And so I think that that's an interesting. dynamic that many of us have been living for a long time, and calls into question, is that always really the best answer for us and for relationships, for all of our dynamics, all of our whole lives. So I think that that's part of it. And the part that becomes even more interesting to me is that once we've gotten clear, for example, that this is okay, this thing is okay, that doing this is okay, and this is not okay, is then holding the boundary. And the what is involved in holding the boundary. And when do we hedge a little bit and say, maybe not hold it as crisply? And when do we say, nope, that's not going to fly for me? And when do we do something in the middle? And here's the other thing that I'm interested in talking about is noticing our own feelings about holding a boundary and recognizing that other people are going to have feelings and reactions to us holding the boundary, and that we are likely, in fact, almost assuredly going to feel some guilt around holding a boundary, especially when it's new, and normalizing that feeling, right? So there's a lot in there that I want to dive into, but those are the three parts for me. That is identifying the boundary, holding the boundary, and noticing that there are reverberations to holding the boundary, and that that's okay. It doesn't mean you're doing something wrong.
And I'd like to add a fourth item
Bring it.
to our agenda, which is it's not just our own boundaries that we need to look after, it's also other people's. And I'm not saying that in a we have responsibility for other people's boundaries, because I think that nuance is so interesting. But it's about the respect that we show our own boundaries. It's important that we show that same respect to somebody else's.
Love that. Oh, yeah, that's full of all the things.
And that thing as well, that there's that thing about, when other people make an assumption about what is okay for you or what is not okay for you, I think that is tied up in boundaries, often from a really good place, often from a place of sort of love or wanting the best for you, inverted commas. But it's not really, it's interesting because the paradox is it's not really a boundaried place, because it's making an assumption that they know what's best for you. And kind of part of boundary setting and boundary acknowledgement is really understanding ourselves, our own needs, and what truly serves us, and respecting other people, but not feeling as though we are responsible for or accountable to others.
Right. Yeah. I think some examples would be helpful here. Um, for me, and I have one that I've been playing with that I want to share, and then I want you to take your fourth agenda item
Okay.
and tell me where you feel it. Okay. So
Okay.
here's my example. My husband and I have a county park that's right near us, and we love to go walking in the woods together. And one of the things that I noticed was that sometimes we would go walking in the woods, and my husband would start talking about politics. He's very interested in politics. He reads a lot about. He's very knowledgeable, very thoughtful, and in general, I don't mind talking about politics with him. But I kept feeling this sort of sticky, gooky feeling when we started talking about politics in the United States, which is a shit show, and full of messiness and discomfort and despair. And so I noticed this, and I noticed this feeling in myself that it would kind of put a stink bomb in the middle of the walk.
Mm.
And so I said to him, let's not talk about politics when we're on our walk. We can talk about it at home, we can talk about it over dinner, we can talk about it other times, but let's not talk about it when we're in nature and together in the woods. And he sort of thoughtfully said, okay. And I noticed that he would catch himself, you know. He would say, oh no, we're not going to talk about that. And I was just like, that was great, and very grateful, acknowledging that. And and then sometimes he would get on a roll, like he'd be rip roaring about something, and he would start to talk about whatever that was. I don't even want to say any names, or like, I don't even want to go there. But he would start talking about something, and I started to play with, how do I respond? How do I choose to hold this boundary? And I
Mm.
played with a couple of different things. I played with not saying anything. I let him talk, but I didn't respond. I didn't engage. I didn't ask any questions. And sometimes I would then just change the subject, right? And other times I would say, nope, no politics on the trail. Nope, nope. And it was interesting just to me how different ways of holding the boundary landed with both him and with me.
Mm.
And 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 I and then just to sort of round out this example, we were walking with a friend on Sunday, and we were talking about all different kinds of things, and the friend brought up politics, and Frank said, oh no, we're not going to do that on the trail. We're not going to do that while we're walking in nature in the woods. And the friend was like, oh, okay. Like that's, and Frank was sort of normalizing, like, this is the way it rolls for us.
Yeah.
And I don't know how Frank felt. I don't know how the friend felt. But
How did you feel? Yeah.
yeah, I felt that he, I don't want to say defend, but he was supporting. I felt supported.
Upholding your boundary.
Yeah, right. Yes, yeah. Because I'm sure he would have been like digging in and like
Mm.
happy to talk about all the messy stuff. So I think that in the past, my tendency is to be when I've made a boundary, to get rigid with it, to get very black and white. And there are times when that is absolutely the way we need to hold our boundaries. Somebody's encroaching on our physical space, if our safety feels impinged upon, if, there's lots of situations for that. But I think in general, I sort of overheld boundaries that didn't need that kind of holding, and finding this sort of middle way feels like an interesting experiment to me.
Mm.
And And
feels like
so,
a sort of softening. A
yeah,
softening
this is
in,
more
not a softening of the boundary.
exactly, exactly.
Mm.
It's like, and part of it can be, especially if a boundary is new, part of it can be that I forget too. I forget, right? Another one that he and I have is that when I'm writing, I ask that he not come in to tell me about what just he saw in the garden, or you know, I want to hear about it, but I don't want to hear about it when I'm in the middle of writing something, because I need to have that. And and that is one too that I have been quite crisp in my defense thereof. and and I can see, I know like he's like, oof, I know I wasn't supposed to do that, and now I feel bad, and then I feel, yeah, like there's this all these feelings around it. And I guess that this comes to the third part of the things I wanted to talk about, is like, um how does it feel if uncomfortable feelings about holding boundaries are is normal and natural, and it's okay.
Mm.
It's okay.
There's, oh gosh, I mean, just so much in what you've just shared. I think kind of working backwards, that the thing about the crispness of when we first put a boundary in place, often my sense is it's because it's become so important that we state the boundary, that we've got ourselves to a place where it's like, if I don't bloody well say something and make this happen, then you're going to keep riding roughshod over me. The challenge is obviously that the other person has no idea that they've been riding roughshod over us. I mean, obviously
Not necessarily. Yeah.
sometimes they really do, and that's a different situation. But in the
Right.
times where it's just like something's been getting to us internally for whatever reason, and the other person has been unaware of it, and then we suddenly put a boundary in place and they inadvertently cross over it. Particularly, quite often we don't actually tell the other person that we've put the boundary in place, and so they have no idea that they have crossed over it. So there's something here about the softening in with clarity of communication. So really explaining to the other person, when I get interrupted when I'm writing, it totally throws me. I know it might sound ridiculous. Why would it throw me? I just know that it does. And so if you do come in, I might be a bit crisp because I might be in the middle of a thought flow and I might be terrified I'm never going to have that thought again and it's gone forever. So there can be something about that, yeah, the kind of like the power of the communication and the clarity with which we state the boundary. Gosh, there was and your other point around the being on the walk, and then the feeling that you had when he upheld your boundary, and the feeling that that gives us, I think, when somebody else supports us in upholding our boundary. It's such a powerful thing that we can do for others. So when we know that that somebody really needs to be left alone when they're writing, to leave them alone when they're writing is a mark of deep respect. But I think often what happens, I'm just going to throw this out there. We can argue this, whether this is true or not. I think often people who don't acknowledge or respect or abide by or uphold other people's boundaries, often they're not that astute yet at setting and maintaining and upholding their own boundaries. Whereas people who have found that within themselves, that ability to identify what boundaries they need, my sense is that often they're pretty good at upholding other people's. I don't know if that's always true. I mean, open
Yeah,
for
yeah.
argument, but
But I think that there is a certain fluency. I want to say it's like uh, an ability um, to even recognize where that may be important to myself or to someone else. This is sort of being able to converse about these things, that we want to say yes to some things and no to other things.
yeah.
And I think that one of the things that I have not in historically been a very fluent boundary maker or keeper. And I think that in part, I never really learned that. Part of it is that I watched most of the women in my life just say yes to all the men in their lives. Um, you know,
And to the children in their lives, and to
yes,
the,
yes,
you
yes.
know,
All
the
of
bosses,
the
the
neighborhoods and the PTO and all of that. Yes, exactly. And I mean, I remember as a young woman saying no to a man who was wanting something from me that I was unwilling to give. And I remember feeling he was pissed, but I remember feeling really supported and respect the self-respect that I felt in making that clear boundary.
mm,
um, that I really like what you're saying, is that the holding of boundaries is an opportunity for respecting another and respecting ourselves.
mm,
And and I think there is a certain amount of practice
yeah,
that goes along with this. I think that this is a
100%,
skill.
100%. And I think your point around when we grow up in an environment where, whatever our gender, where our caregivers are either adept or not that adept at boundary making and maintaining, it will influence how we are. We'll either be different from them, or we'll be the same as a, as a way of expressing our love for our caregivers. We
Yeah.
emulate them. And I'm just mindful of like my own mother, and she worked full time. She had 4 children. She was a teacher, and I remember one story where her head at the school asked her to do, I don't know, like organize the parent teachers evening or whatever it was, and she was just like, oh, do you not know, I literally have not got a minute in the day. And he said, if you need something doing, ask the busiest person you know. And she always saw that. She always saw that as being like a kind of affirmation, you know, because you're so efficient, because you're so hardworking, because you're so capable, because I trust you, because you will get this done. Now, as I'm listening to you, I've just reframed what happened there into, he saw someone who never said no.
Right.
So he knew that she would
Love it.
say yes. Because that's what the busiest person that you know keeps doing,
Uh-huh.
isn't it?
That's right.
That's why they're so busy.
That's right.
And one of my really dear friends has been like learning this. this act of how to put stuff down and leave it down. How to put stuff down and say, actually, no, for me right now, this thing, it's not right for me to be picking this thing up and being the one who manages it, does it, whatever. Because so much of boundary setting is about what feels okay. And I think the biggest challenge can be actually listening in to that, to our inner response, in order to understand, well, where do I need the boundary to be? So your story about the guy wanting something from you that you were not prepared to give, in another moment, with another set of circumstances in your own upbringing, you might not have been able to hear that voice that said no. It might have been so quiet because there were so many other voices that said, well, I haven't got a choice, or this isn't, that this is, I have,
or this
whatever.
is what I'm supposed to do.
This is what I'm supposed to do.
It's the supposed to. I think that's a big indicator for me, is whenever I should do this, I'm supposed to do this, is often a red flag for me of something that I am overriding my own internal voice, or my own internal integrity, my integrity with myself. And and then the same thing happened on the trail when we would start talking politics. I would get that like that
feeling, like icky feeling.
yes. And so that's the sign that this is like, yes in another setting, no in this setting. And so I think that's absolutely right, is listening to our own inner knowing, our own knowledge. And this, again, as I will often circle back to our ability to be intimate with our internal sensation, and knowing the difference between a yes and a no, or even a small yes, like a yes-ish, and a big yes. Like those are important discernments that we can practice that as well, right?
And that comes back to your point around, sometimes we can bump up against our own boundaries, and so for me, I've talked about this before on the podcast. I don't see clients before 10 o'clock in the morning, and it's not because I don't like mornings. It's because I love mornings. I love my morning. It's just a really wonderful part of my day. And so I'm giving that to me.
Right.
That's my boundary. I also rarely see clients on a Monday, and I will only see them on a Friday morning, but I really try not to. But definitely not a Friday afternoon.
Right.
However, all of those boundaries are all open for interpretation by me, not by anybody else, but by me. So I saw a client yesterday because my diary is really full. I'm coming up to my big summer break, so everything starts to get, quite full. And I knew that was the only time that we could find. So I bent my boundary. I made a little indent in it, and I let her in. And that's okay. But if I keep doing that, then I would start to question, okay, so what is driving that? What people-pleasing tendency, what you're not working hard enough voice, what you should, you ought, you must, what's going on there that's driving something which I have in my like full adult self decided, no, this is how a good working day, week, year looks like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like my August break, and I know you like to take long breaks as well. It's like, so I'm off for the whole of August, and when I first started doing it, it was, it was easy to find myself agreeing to do things,
Right.
and now I don't.
Right. And this is part of what I really wanted to get to, was that when I get clear on the boundary that I want to draw, like whether it's time off, I love the way that you're setting up your schedule for yourself, in integrity with yourself. The act of doing that is going to bring up feelings, and it takes practice to not see. This is something that comes up for me too, is like, can I really take the whole of July off? Can I really do that? I'm going to let people down. I'm going to disappoint people. They're going to think all the things that you're talking about. I'm a slacker. Do you say that in England? Do you say that? You're a slacker. And so I can feel guilty. And so I can start backpedaling. And I guess that part of what I want to say is that feeling of feeling guilty or feeling like I'm doing something wrong is simply the building of the boundary muscle.
Yes, beautiful.
And right. And so that, right, I am going against my own habit of overriding what I want for what other people want from me.
Yes.
And so choosing not to do that is going to bring up stuff. It's going to bring up like, fear in myself. It's going to bring up awkwardness perhaps in the interaction in the relationship. It might bring up some humph. You're going away for all of August, Henny. I want to do something on the 13th and, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So, and part of the process is to say, nope, I'm building that muscle. Like, I'm going to, and I can hold to it in a soft way. And I don't have to say, click 'em the bird. And
exactly. And so it's that thing about being able to turn toward that internal voice and go, okay, my darling, I hear that, in the same way that if, so someone, like my dad, I mean, parents, siblings, their voices, they're often very loud, aren't they? What was it? I said, I think maybe about the August break, actually. And my dad said, you can't afford to take a whole month off. And I said, that's interesting. And he said, what? And I said, well, it's interesting that the place that your head went to was financial. And it's also interesting that the set of assumptions that you've made in that statement, I find that fascinating. And also, I think it says more about you, my darling, than it does about me. I'm taking August off.
Yeah.
And it's okay. You don't need to worry about me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because so often, actually, those voices, those boundary setting, the parts of us that are resisting the boundary, it's just because they're worried about something. So they're worried people won't like you if you're not around Susan in July. And people might not want to come to your classes anymore if you're not always available 24/7. You know, they can bring us into a headspace of lack. We're not going to have enough, fill in the blank, you know, whatever it might be. They're all just they're little fears.
Yeah, they're fears. Yeah,
They're just
exactly.
fears. And I think one of the really important things with boundary setting is to set them from a place of groundedness rather than sometimes it is just get out of my face. Like, that's okay, fair enough. You're in a place where that's the only option. But if we can set them from a grounded place, then when we find ourselves trying to bend them or we find someone else pushing up against them, then it can be, then to remind ourselves, how did I feel when I set that boundary? What was going on for me? What was the rationale? And the more we do it, the quicker we can get back into that place and then hold the boundary from that place rather than from an emotional, you're butting up against my boundary.
Yeah, right.
You know.
Yeah, and I think I think that's absolutely, this grounded place, grounded in love and not fear. Right? I think that the times that I have overridden my what I knew was a boundary for me is because of fear of rejection, fear of criticism, fear of judgment, fear of any of the things. And you're exactly right. Your dad saying, Henny, don't be silly. You can't take a whole month off. There's like, he's worried about your safety. He's worried about your security. He's worried about your business. He's worried, like he's afraid for your, sort of core safety or at some level. Right.
And also he's operating from his worldview where when you run a business, you have to be there all the time. You know, and that, because for him, that was true with the business that he ran. And I'm saying, well, I'm choosing to run a business in a very different way. And actually that's okay. And it's okay that it feels uncomfortable for you.
Right.
It's okay. I don't mind.
It sounds like you brought such curiosity and calm to that, because that I could definitely imagine a scenario where somebody says, you can't afford that. And it's like, what the hell do you know? I mean, like really pushing back and just be like, And
I would have done in the past.
Like right. I mean, yeah. And, but I love how there's the softening, right? There's like, oh, darling,
yeah,
you're afraid.
Yeah.
And you can be afraid if you want to be afraid, but it's okay.
It's okay. I don't need to take your fear on.
Right. Exactly. And I don't need to spit it back in your face either.
Exactly.
Right. But that's really what I think interested in, and we don't get there overnight.
No.
Like, we're all, and it depends on the person, and it depends on the boundary, and it depends on how long we've been practicing these things. And, there's part of me that would love to just sort of put a microscope on that moment when he said that to you. If there was a little bit of a prickly feeling, maybe,
without a doubt. I mean, I know in that moment, I had a choice to go adolescent, shut up, or child, oh, I can do it if I want to, or adult, oh, my darling. And there's a quote, actually. I pulled out a few quotes when I was kind of thinking about today. And one is from, I don't actually know who she is. You might know her. Melody Beattie. Have you come across her? Didn't recognize her name. Anyway, the quote was, We cannot simultaneously set a boundary and take care of another person's feelings. And I don't know if that is true. I'm not sure that that's true, because my sense is, no, it doesn't mean accommodate or sort of be have the other person's feelings be more important than our own. It's not that, but I think we can simultaneously set a boundary and take care of another person's feelings in the way that we set it. So by not reacting emotionally, by being very clear and very authentic to ourselves, and by expressing what we're saying in such a way that it's not like a challenge to the other person, or a denial of the other person's rights or
feelings. I mean, just
feelings.
how they
Yeah.
need. Yeah.
But just
Yeah.
by
I
being
think that
really
there,
clear.
yeah. I think that the distinction for me is, I have no idea the context of this quote, but I cannot simultaneously set a boundary and be sure that the other person is going to feel hunky-dory about it.
That I will go with, because that's the
Okay.
Brené Brown quote.
Yeah.
Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others.
Right.
But saying
So I
that,
can,
go.
yeah, I mean, I think that there's a difference between, I can't, like, one of my pet peeves is when people say, you made me feel sad, or you made me feel, yeah, no, 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 I did not do that. I am unable to make you feel anything. However, I can make space for your feelings.
Yes.
Right? Like, I can hold a boundary, set a boundary, hold a boundary, and make space for, I see that you're feeling anxious about this, or it seems like you are disappointed in me, or disappointed in this situation, or perhaps feel, whatever. I mean, I can
Or
make
someone
space.
says, I need this from you. I need this thing from you. And your boundary is from a very true place. I can't deliver that for you, my love.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but we can still hold the space for the other person's need, even while we hold the space for our own need, for our boundary.
Right. Right. This speaks to something that that came up in an interaction I had. Um, that it's a question of um, integrity and truth, right? And so one of the things that I sometimes come up against is that my boundary, the boundary that I'm setting in this situation, let's say, um, has two of my values conflicting, right? So maybe I have a value of kindness or generosity, and I have a value of the space that I need to create, or the mornings for you, or my writing time for me. And I see those two things as being um, in conflict with each other. However, someone said to me when I was presenting that, I was like, well, I mean, these are two things that I care about. And they said, can you really be in integrity with another person if you're not in integrity with yourself? And in fact, if you try to be in quote unquote integrity with, say, generosity, when that generosity is not coming from a true place, it's actually like a lie.
Yeah.
Like your mom saying that she could organize the spring fling or whatever he was wanting her to organize. And she says yes when she is up to her eyelashes in children and work is a lie. And so it's actually not a conflict.
Oh, I love that.
Right? It's like, right? I mean, it's really interesting to me to look at it that way. That what I am doing for others must come from an integrity place in myself.
So I see everything that I do now as part of my work. So every time I go and do a bit of gardening in the middle of the day, every time I had a bath on Monday, late Monday morning, because that was really what I needed. I hadn't had an opportunity to sort of have one on Sunday, and there's this voice that says you can't have a bath on a Monday morning, and then there's this like part of me that goes, hang on a minute, this is part of the work. This is like part of breaking down those voices, those internal rules that I've set. So I see everything that I do as part of the work, capital W, and my work, because it's about living what I do, you know.
It's your practice.
Living
it's
who
I
am. It's my practice.
Your practice.
Yeah.
Yes. Your practice is to take a bath.
It's
when you need to take a bath.
When I need to take a bath. Exactly. And so I am aware that the act of listening to what feels like integrity inside me is part of what I would call my job. Mm-hmm. Because if I act out of integrity, I'm not doing my job. Mm-hmm. Now, what I'm curious about as I'm listening to you is I just wonder if I was still working in the city, but I had actually, yeah. Do you know what? Okay, so the last sort of 18 months when I was working in the city, I really was honing my boundaries. I'd forgotten this. This is a nice little thing actually to recall. So even while I was working in an environment which is designed to leech every ounce of your energy, and every part of you is set, you know, is put under demand. Even in that environment, I set and maintained some really clear boundaries for myself. And I set them in a process that I called small change. Or, you know, so I would, I started like playing with my journey into work. I started being really clear in the way that we set up and structured meetings. I became very clear in what I needed from my team at the end of the day or at the end of the week in terms of clarity on work that had been completed. I was extremely clear about the boundaries, but in a very measured, very calm way, because that was part of how I made being in that environment okay for me. So I think the reason for saying all of that is it's ever so easy when you listen to a conversation like this to think, oh God, well, it's okay for the two of them. Look at them. They're wafting about doing their you know, therapy sort of jobs, and they're not living in a real world that, and in many ways it is true. The choices that we have made in our lives that have brought us to this place is is different from many people's, just as actually everybody's choices and everybody's lives are different from everybody else's. But even in that kind of environment where we are, where it looks like boundaries are an impossible thing, I think we can set them. But it's about understand. Sometimes those boundaries are inner ones. They're about, okay, so my boundary is I'm not going to get triggered by this person. That's my boundary. I'm going to participate in a meeting with this person who, before has really, really activated me, and I'm going to deeply love myself through that interaction to such a degree that they cannot touch me. And that is my boundary. God, that felt like I just talked for a really long time.
Well, I'll tell you what I was thinking about. I'll tell you what I was thinking about. I was thinking about when my stepkids were young. And children, I think, are really a challenging place. And I do believe that it is possible to create boundaries even with you were talking about things like colleagues and people who we don't want to touch, like that we want to like have a wall against. But even with people that we deeply love and for whom we are responsible, we can still say no. That mom needs. I need to do this, and you need to find something else to do for this half hour, or right, that you don't get me 100% of the time, even my child.
And if I set this boundary, then and I maintain this boundary, you will have the best of me. But if I don't set this, or if I don't maintain it, I am going to get to a point where we're back to what we were saying at the beginning of this conversation. My only response is an emotional, just, I need this space, whatever our response might be.
Right. And that's, I think that's, it feels very potent, very concentrated when we're talking about children and family. But really what you just said is so true for everybody. For the, for our kids and for our partners and for our colleagues and for our neighbors. If I'm not holding you're not getting the best of me.
Yeah.
You're getting a ragged, resentful version of me. And so I am doing this out of love. And it may not feel like it to you, and that's fine. And we can talk about that if that doesn't feel like it to you. Like if it feels like you should be able to ask all of these things of me that I am unable to deliver in integrity with myself. But yeah.
I think there's something here as well about the surprise it can be sometimes for other people when we suddenly set a boundary. If someone is, and often this comes up with menopause actually, where suddenly the our willingness to compromise on our own needs fades. And often women find like, well, actually,
or disappears.
Yeah, or just goes overnight. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And that can be a bit of a shocker for those around us, because it's just like, well, what's happened to mum, or what's happened to my partner, my colleague, and so I suppose there's something in here about the kind of mutual respect that is really important in boundary setting, and in that we support others in understanding what our boundaries are. And if they refuse to listen, well, that's their choice. But we start from a place of integrity and
Mm-hmm.
intention that others understand. Um, and we also then respect our own choice to make those boundaries, and we respect ourselves to such an extent that we also hold them even when it feels uncomfortable or when we feel
Right.
guilty.
Mm-hmm.
I had another sort of story, actually. It's just kind of popped into my head, and again, it's so interesting because sometimes it feels like such a little thing. You know, when we're talking about boundaries around someone, a man asking something of a woman that the woman doesn't want to give, and it's of a sexual nature, that is like one like end of that boundary spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
I think often we can sort of get a bit kind of like, oh God, does it really matter, when it's at the other end of the spectrum and it can feel like such a small thing. But actually, it's the practice and the maintenance of those small things that I think enables us to really hold true with the bigger things, or hold true when it really, really matters. So there was one the other day where I'm doing a series of lives on Instagram at the moment about my new book, which incidentally, boundary setting would be one of those. So the book is All the Ways I Tell Myself I Love You. Have I told you about this?
I don't think so.
So that's it. Obviously backwards
Look
on
at
the
that.
screen.
It's so beautiful. No,
So
it looks great. Yeah.
it's but it's all about what are the little things that we do that
Mm-hmm.
tell ourselves I love you. Setting a boundary would be one of those. I'm doing a series of lives on Instagram. I asked someone to help me with one. She's amazing. I'd really love to talk to her about it, all about self-love. And she came back and said, oh God, I'm so busy, but I could do it on Sunday evening just for you. And I went back and I said, no, let's not. Sunday evenings are important. And she came back and said, thank you for holding my boundary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's such a tiny thing. I could so easily have just said, oh, thanks, Rebecca. That would be brilliant. But
Yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that we know this about habits. We know this about um, the things that we do repeatedly in relationship and in our work, in our practices. The little things really do matter. I just wrote a blog post not long ago about what matters, and very often, what it may sound like a small thing. Put the dishes in the dishwasher,
Oh, I saw that.
please. Right?
It's so
I mean, and it's like, what? You're gonna be mad because I don't put the dishes in the dishwasher? And I'm like, but there's so much about that we've talked about already, about respect for each other, um for acknowledging, if it matters to you, then it's important,
yeah.
right? Yeah, I think you're right on.
Oh gosh, I'm mindful that what time of day is it with you now?
It's midday for me
Midday. Okay.
in
And
yeah,
I'm coming into the
the evening.
evening, and
Yeah.
yeah, I oh, I just wonder, is there like one or two just like really key things that come out of this conversation? What's standing out for you personally, actually, Susan? What's the thing you're taking
I
from this?
yeah, I think that what's really standing out for me is is first of all being self-referential. referring to myself in regard to what I am choosing to do, rather than being aware of the should and the obligation, or that
Can I can
feeling.
I can I add something in there, which is
Yeah.
the owning the decision.
Hmm.
So there's something about the language that we use where we prevaricate and we say things like, "Oh, I don't know, I might not be able to do that," as opposed to just owning the decision of no.
Right.
No.
Yeah. The no is a complete sentence. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. You
just
don't say, I know it seems like not that much of a, yeah. Yeah. I
yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah. I
Just
think that's
just
right.
no,
And
I'm
just
really
use,
sorry. I really sorry I can't help you.
yeah.
Or I'm sorry that you'll need to find somebody else,
Right.
but I'm
Right.
not sorry that I can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Or
A
that
friend
I
of mine
choose not to do it.
calls it the yes, no, yes. You ever heard this? Answering, somebody asks something of you that you don't want to know. The answer that you want to give is no, but you give a yes, no, yes. Yes, at some point I would love to work with you, Henny. No, I can't do it right now. My schedule is really full, but let's find a time when we can. So yes, no, yes. And that is a way of standing behind what you're saying, but also being clear and aware that, you know, and only giving the second yes that you want to see,
Yes.
right? Yeah. Yeah. Not just kicking the can down the road. Yeah. So I think that for me, being self-referential, being aware of what is important to me, what I need in a situation, and and making space for the possibility that lands uh, flat with somebody else. Totally okay.
Hmm.
And that is part of the process. And I think this idea of of approach, I just love, again, I just love your approach to your dad of approaching it with curiosity rather than defensiveness,
Hmm.
or collapse, right? You know, can I just be open to, that's the way you feel about it? Okay.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. You can think
Yeah.
differently from me. I
Yeah.
humor, or not necessarily humor, because sometimes that can turn into like laughing at, but humor as in joyful intention can
Lightness,
be such a
holding it
powerful
lightly.
tool.
Yeah.
Holding it lightly,
Yeah.
exactly, can be such a powerful tool. It's like, well, okay, I understand. I understand that you might make a different choice from me. That's okay.
Yeah.
This is the
Yeah.
choice I'm making.
Yeah.
Um, there's a really useful technique that I often teach in to clients, which is, you'll be very familiar with it, which is this idea of like sort of head, heart, hara. So the hara being, you know, the kind of belly or your gut instinct. And it's been sort of playing at the back of my mind as we've been talking, just that how useful that is with boundaries and coming into a place of integrity around whether or not you need to set one, maintain one, move one out of the way for the moment, you know. So going, okay, so what does my head say about this? Often the head is the part with the shoulds and the oughts and what will people think. And what does the heart say? Well, that's your emotional response. Oh, I really feel like again, shoulds can come in. They might not like me anymore. And then you can,
Or the
or I
should,
need
like,
to do it. Yeah, but I want to be kind. I want to express my love. And then we come into the belly, the hara, and that often is where it goes, no. Like, this is not right for you. And it's like, oh, okay, thank you, belly. Like, thanks for just
that's the
reminding
center.
me.
That's the heart is the center of the physical center of the body. And that was the centeredness that you were talking about
Yeah,
before. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So centered, yeah, boundaries from a centered place.
Boundaries from a centered place. There we go.
Hmm.
We've got our headline.
Oh, this is so good.
Gorgeous conversation. Thank you, my darling. And what are you doing for the rest of your afternoon? Let's just have a
Oh,
little
I'm gonna go.
glimpse into Susan's life.
Yes, I'm going to go and have a little lunch. I'm going to have tea with a friend.
Hmm. This
And I'm
sounds
going
like
to do,
boundaried life,
and I'm
Susan.
going to write a blog post. I'm going to do some writing, and no one is going to interrupt me.
I'm going to go and do a bit of weeding in the garden.
Nice, nice,
Take care, my love.
lovely. Oh, you must have a lot. Must be in a time of long twilight where you are right now. So
And
lots.
full moon tonight.
Ooh,
Yeah.
enjoy. You could weed by moonlight.
Take care, my love.
You too.
So, another astonishing, glorious conversation with the astonishing, glorious Susan McCulley. And I really look forward to hearing your own reflections on boundaries and on how hard they can sometimes seem. And I just wanted to share one last thought, actually, that Susan and I were just discussing, and um, and the point was that often with clients, I will talk about the distinction between boundaries and a palisade. So a palisade is like 10-foot tall with really thick, strong bits of wood tightly packed together and iron bands all the way around it. And, there's nothing can possibly get through. And the difference is with a boundary is it's a bit more like a ha-ha. If you know what a ha-ha is, it's, that sort of almost like moat-like thing that you get around English country houses to stop the sheep and the cows coming up to the house. So almost it's this thing that you can see over, and other people can see you on the other side of your ha boundary, and it means that it's not this sort of big kind of rigid thing like a palisade is. It's something that is much gentler. And and for me, I found that to be quite a useful thing to remember, because when the boundary starts feeling a bit brittle, back to Susan's point about when she could get a bit sharp with her husband when he interrupted her when she was doing her writing, when the boundary starts to get a bit brittle, it's almost like it starts to transform into a palisade. And so then we can kind of soften back and go, hang on a minute, what's actually going on here? And how do I want to communicate this? Always remembering, of course, that sometimes a really firm no is actually what is needed. And we also just touched on this idea of, as a parent, how we can find ourselves, but I think it's as a parent, as a partner, as a colleague, as a friend, as a member of the community, we can, part of our identity can be caught up with being the person who always sort of does everything for others. But it doesn't always help others when we don't have any boundaries for ourselves. And I think that can be quite an interesting one to reflect on if you find boundaries can be a bit of a challenge for you. So yeah, share your thoughts. It's always just wonderful. And The other thing as well is please do leave a review for the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to listen. But I think, according to the stats, most people listen on Apple Podcasts. It's incredibly useful. And it's something that a number of people have asked me to remind them to do. So I'm now officially reminding you to do a review for the podcast and to remember to subscribe to it as well. It's one of the best ways that we can help get other people here and help them listen to the things that we share as well. So thank you very much for being here. It's been wonderful to spend this time with you, as always. And I send you a hug and a wave.